Hey guys, and welcome to my Temple of Aminishi or Elite Dungeon 1 guide. And no, this is not a token farming guide, this is a guide to the full dungeon. So when you're ready, grab your cup of tea, sit back, relax, and enjoy. If you're in a group, you should be able to do Elite Dungeon 1 just fine with 80 plus combat stats. If you're solo, I recommend 90 plus combat stats because this is by far the hardest Elite Dungeon. The trash mobs hit extremely hard and you'll be taking a huge amount of damage. Not to mention, some of the bosses can be quite tricky as well. And the other stats are of course recommended because they help tremendously with PVM, Prayer for Curses, Soul Split is especially useful here for the trash mobs, 96 plus Summoning for Steel Titan if you're good and experienced, or a high level BOB Familiar to carry extra food, and 96 plus Herblore for overloads of course. Here's a list of various useful items that can help you throughout the dungeon. The chest upgrade, of course, costing 750,000 engineering tokens, can be used for banking and quality of life, because this way you don't have to toggle your chest every time you're killing a boss for a chance to get a double drop. The lucky charms, of course, costing 10,000 engineering tokens a pop, are useful for extra money making if you can spare the tokens, which you'll probably make back of the mini bosses or the bosses themselves, as they give 5,000 each. Dominion mines, of course, are useful for the crystals on Seiryu's back. Weapon poison plus plus or plus plus plus, and Cinderbane gloves are useful because most of the trash mobs are actually poisonable in the dungeon. Of course, your rings and invention switches, the enhanced Excalibur for extra healing, a spiritual prayer potion if you want extra deep spamming that Steel Titan special, mechanized enchantments with range for the AoE damage, the belated dive ability bought from the Shattered Worlds minigame, which I do have a guide for, of course, link in the description below, for mobility, and the same can be said about Double Surge. And for magic and range, you have the Corruption Blast and Shot ability, which are AoE Corruption Bleeds, which can be obtained by activating a Maz Capability Codex, which is tradable and buyable on the Grand Exchange. For gear, I'll be showing you an example of a higher level player, though not maxed out, with maximum switches, and a slightly lower level or mid-level setup for people with a lower budget range. Of course, just use the best gear you have, and as for the inventory setup, take it with a grain of salt. If you have more switches, bring them. If you have less switches or you don't have bladed dive, you don't switch to dual wield, just don't bring them along and fill up those slots with more food. But generally you want to have your overloads or stat boosting potions, replenishment potions, super restores or prayer potions, sour doom brews, food, and lucky charms. And one thing with melee that's extremely good here is the Scrimshaw Vampirism to help you heal up, while using a Zerka Aura or Penance Aura. For magic, it's pretty similar, just bring the best gear you have along. Be sure to bring along a shield switch for the occasional resonance at some of the bosses. And magic is especially powerful here, using the Corruption Blast ability and Detonate to clear the mobs quickly. And you can also use Tsunami to your advantage at certain areas as well. And again, this is just an example. You can also use Scrimshaws instead of that gold book. In fact, that is much better, but it's also more costly. Here are some ranged setups, and of course with range you want to be using dual wield for the option to utilize the mechanized enchantments for AoE damage. You can actually buy these off the Grand Exchange, and while using these, all of your basic abilities will be in AoE form, so they will hit multiple targets, being extremely powerful and useful to clear the mobs. Now there's multiple ways of getting there, but the easiest way to get there is teleport to the Draenor Lodestone and go towards the PVM hub. If you have 1 kill count, you can actually reattune your boss portal towards the Elite Dungeon 1, aka the Temple of Aminishi, but otherwise you can also use the ED3 portal all the way to the right, go through it and use the chest to teleport to the Temple of Aminishi from the Elite Dungeon 3 area. You can also go there by teleporting with your Ring of Kingship to the Dungeoneering area and walking towards the Elite Dungeon 3 or Shadow Reef area, right-clicking the chest and choosing Teleport and going towards the Temple of Aminishi. There are some other ways of getting there, like the ARG or the Max Guild Portal and the Group System Teleport. Even in solo you can use that, but these are the two fastest options. Now I'll be covering the dungeon section by section, but if you want a full map is on screen now, showing you section 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Keep in mind some sections are a little confusing while others are completely straightforward. To start the dungeon, simply click on the door and choose normal mode. Now you want to take the most northern barrier as seen in the video and kill the 4 mobs you can see close to that barrier to open it up. Once you kill off these mobs, you want to move all the way east or forward depending on how you put your screen. You can ignore these mobs near the church. You want to kill the large group in front of you by using AoE abilities like Tsunami, Detonate, Corruption Blast and Shot, or your mechanized enchompers. If you're doing this solo, even though this is more so a group guide, it will take you slightly longer and you'll take a lot more damage, as the trash mobs in Elite Dungeons 1 are pretty tough. It might be useful to pray against some of the mobs and use Devotion instead of using Soul Split, as some can hit extremely hard. The second section of the dungeon is really straightforward. Follow the video as seen and kill the same mobs as we do and take the same barrier. Once you put down the barrier, move through the barrier and ignore the Arhats type dragon creatures. Kill the 3 mobs standing in front of the barrier in front of the first boss. Then what I like to do is to teleport out with my group. This way, once you teleport back in, you won't have the Arhats or other mobs aggro towards you. And you can go into the boss fight without the other creatures attacking you. This is the Sanctum Guardian. Against this boss you mainly want to be praying ranged. He has 4 main mechanics. In trio, however, you can ignore some of the mechanics and it's very easy. Solo is a different story. The first mechanic is the water splash. The Guardian will jump into the air and splash out water. For this attack you want to quickly switch towards your melee prayer to reduce the incoming damage and then switch back to ranged. That is all you have to do to counter this attack. The next attack is the energy beam, and if you're standing in the locations we are standing in, you're safe from the first initial hit, including if you stand there using magic or ranged. During this energy beam you can actually use Soul Split and heal back some health. Just be sure to use the location marked in red so that you don't get hit by the initial hit, then move to the side and then move back to your starting position. The next mechanic is the smoke. You will get a blue bar above your head and once it completely disappears, you will place smoke that will deal typeless damage towards you if you stand in it. You want to place this smoke to the side of the arena, however if you're doing this solo, the smoke areas do add up, because the smoke does not disappear until the boss is actually killed. So it comes down to your ability to DPS to make it as easy as possible for yourself, because as I've shown in my boss ranking video, if you do this solo and you lack in DPS, you'll have a bunch of smoke on your screen and in the fight arena, and he will also use his final mechanic, which is summoning 2 crab minions, which really aren't that big of a deal, but they still deal a slight bit of damage. After killing the Sanctum Guardian, go through the door to section 3. This section is by far the most dangerous mob-wise, and it can also be confusing. Use this path. Then continue by using this path. Keep in mind the camera angle is actually turned around. Be sure to use abilities like Surge, Bladed Dive and Barge to get through here faster. Follow the video as seen and run through this area until you get to the barrier, then kill the mobs in front of it to open it up. Be sure to watch out for the Hanto Cell Swords and the Death Lotus Rogues, as these can do a huge amount of damage. The Cell Swords can actually spin, just like Masuta the second boss, and deal a huge amount of damage. The Death Lotus Rogues have something similar, except it's 8x8 and AoE, so area of effect, and it can deal damage to everyone around them. As for the section you're seeing on screen, just use Surge and Barge and Bladed Dive to get through here faster. Then just kill the mobs in front of the barrier to open it up and follow the video as seen. Go over the bridge and go up the area after opening up the barrier. There's actually a way of using Surge here and using Bladed Dive to get up there straight into the minions by using your minimap, or if you're a little lucky just by using it regularly, but it's a little difficult to do. It's just a little trick you can do to save you some time. After you enter through the door, you'll be in section 4. Be sure to follow the path on the video and ignore all of the rooms to the side. After entering the second barrier, you'll have some Death Lotus rogues which you want to focus down because they deal a huge amount of damage, and then move on to the third barrier, open it up and teleport out. This area is rather easy until you open up the second barrier, as there are a huge amount of minions or trash mobs there, so be sure to use your AoE abilities and move towards the barrier if you want to be safe from them. The rangers will follow you, and if you want you can focus them down or quickly open up the barrier in trio, teleport out, and then they won't be aggressive towards you anymore. Go back in with full adrenaline using the PVM up if you have it activated, and then get ready for the second boss. Masuta is arguably one of the more harder bosses in Elite Dungeon 1. We'll be covering the mechanics mechanic by mechanic, and then I'll show you guys a full kill. In phase 1 you have 4 main mechanics. You have the clones, the hurricane/spin attack, the purple energy magic attack, and the pulverize attack. The reason you want to start off the fight with your melee prayer on and devotion ready is because these clones hit a huge amount of melee damage, and apart from that, Masuta can follow that up straight away with one of those hurricane spin attacks, which are extremely dangerous if you're in distance, and if you're solo, you cannot actually outrun it. The only true option you have is to use Surge if you're solo, but if you're in a group, usually Masuta follows one guy around, and if the others are using magic, you're actually safe from Masuta's spin as long as you keep your distance. The next mechanic, or special, is this purple energy or purple attack that charges up and then hits you with a massive magic hit. If you're not using magic prayer or deflect magic, you can actually get KO'd quite easily by this initial hit. I've died to this hit plenty of times by not paying attention. If you see the purple things charging up, be ready to switch to your magic prayer as soon as you see the smoke. You can actually avoid the entire magic hit by surging away and staying out of Masuta's distance when he's charging up that attack. And apparently there's another attack where he says, "I'll pulverize you and deal a huge amount of melee damage." I've not seen it too often in duos or trios though. The second phase will start when Masuta jumps into the air and starts hovering around and spawning thrashing waters. He will start spawning these little thrashing waters or water tornadoes, and these deal magic damage, so be sure to pray against magic attacks. Destroy them while standing close to them, as they give you a percentage stack that decreases Masuta's magic damage in the third phase. And trust me, you'll want to have this stack, otherwise this will happen. Boom. Dead. Devotion may also help decrease the damage you take in this second phase. You can see the percentage of damage reduction you have stacked up on your buff bar. So yeah, don't forget to stand close to the thrashing waters before killing them. Now phase 3 is really simple and it follows straight after the second phase. The magic slam attack is the only attack that's actually dangerous. You want to be praying ranged at all times and only switch to magic whenever Masuta jumps into the air, as a huge magic hit will follow. If you got the percentage stack from the thrashing waters in the previous phase, this damage will deal less damage and the chance of you getting KO'd is much lower. Now let's have a look at a slightly sped up trio kill. As you can see, because we're using magic and Masuta is actually focusing pleb shot, the guy using melee weapons, we don't get attacked by his basic melee hits, but we do get attacked by his ranged attacks. Until he starts spinning around, and basically anyone in proximity of him does take damage, so we surge away. Now before you know it, we're in phase 2 and the thrashing waters have spawned. The thing I'm doing wrong is I'm not standing close enough, so I'm missing the debuff or buff to decrease the damage from Masuta in the third phase. Of course, if you are using melee, you probably won't have this problem, as you'll be in melee distance all the time with the thrashing waters. Here we are in phase 3. Right after killing these last thrashing waters, Masuta starts. Now you want to be praying ranged. As you can see, I almost died there, and every time he jumps into the air we switch to our magic prayers, and sometimes we mess it up and you can see us taking a huge hit, and it almost kills me every time. This is why the thrashing waters buff or debuff from the magic hits in the second phase is such an importance. After killing Masuta, go down the stairs and you'll be in section 5. This section is really straightforward, just run down and finish off those few pylons we are attacking nearby the bank chest. After finishing them off and opening up the barrier, bank and return to the dungeon for the final boss. In solo, this boss can take very long, but again, this is more a group-focused beginner's guide. Now, Seiryu's mechanics are really easy to avoid, except if you're not paying attention and you're caught off guard. So the three main mechanics are the deep breath, the shadow tails, and the shadow hands. The deep breath is when you get a message on your screen that Seiryu is taking a deep breath, and then you'll see him blowing some purple cloud of purple fire over you, and after that you'll take a high magic hit. You can actually use this for free heals whenever you want if you're paying attention and your timing is correct. You want to equip your shield and use resonance and get a fat heal for free. The shadow tails are little black circles that spawn under you, which have little tentacles or tails or whatever they actually are, and these deal typeless damage to you, and the longer you stand in them, they'll do more damage. You also have the shadow hands mechanic, which you can easily see coming by the shadow energy bursts from Seiryu message on your screen, and the pointing arrow and electric cloud flying towards the area where the hands will first spawn. You'll want to move away from these hands or this area as fast as possible, as these hands will follow you around like a heat-seeking missile and deal a huge amount of typeless damage. Now, this is the only boss in Runescape you can't actually kill. The way you actually finish off this boss is by destroying the black crystals on his back. At 7.2 million health, Seiryu will be knocked out for the first time. You can then jump on his back and start attacking the black crystals. Dominion mines here are extremely useful and powerful for extra damage. Vulning the crystals is also recommended. Now, you'll want to try and do as much damage towards these crystals as possible until you see blobs spawning from the hands. Then you want to jump down, because these blobs actually heal the crystals on Seiryu's back if they come towards Seiryu and get the chance to heal him up. That's why you want to aggro them and kill them as fast as possible so they do not reach Seiryu. In duos or trios, usually one person will do this. The first time around, you'll have to jump down. The second time around, once you go up, you'll actually be teleported down and stunned for the next set of blobs. You can use Anticipate to avoid this stun, but it is recommended to do more damage instead, and once you get teleported down, to use Freedom and then attack the blobs. Don't worry, as your entire party will be teleported down. And with that being said, that's my Elite Dungeon 1 guide. Now, this is a great dungeon to do for money solo because you have a chance of getting some big boy consistent drops like the scales, which can make you a huge amount of money. Elite Dungeon 1, much like Elite Dungeon 2 and 3, is also incredibly good combat experience and a good way to improve your PvM ability, especially when doing bosses like Masuta solo. I'll be sure to add some unsped up, uncut boss kills in the description of this video later on. And with that being said, if you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please leave a like down below and maybe even consider subscribing. And if you're interested in following me on Twitch, Twitter, or Instagram, those links will be in the description below as well. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.